I'd like to share a Final Straw Radio
Mini episode.
conversation with Emilio of the currently unofficial Sonoma County IWW, or Industrial Workers of the World. This chapter doesn't yet have an official charter, but they were in the process of organizing one when the fires in Northern California started last week, and have used this as a platform for fundraising and trying to work out solidarity relief in Santa Rosa, the seat of Sonoma County. For this chat, Emilio and I talk about the weather patterns in northern coastal California, relief efforts by the Red Cross and other NGOs around shelter and care distribution, what the nascent IWW chapter is trying to do, and related topics. You can find out more about their chapter by going on the fedbook and entering in SOCO IWW, that's SOCO IWW, and you can stay tuned in the conversation for their relief phone number, a few material needs you can provide from a distance, where you can send them, and ways to get involved if you are in Northern California. We're speaking with a member of the Sonoma County Industrial Workers of the World, or IWW, about the fires that have decimated Santa Rosa, California, and the surrounding counties. Thanks for chatting, and would you care to introduce yourself further?
Hey, thanks for having me on, Burst. My name's Emilio. I'm a member of the IWW in Sonoma County. We're not an official membership branch of the IWW yet. We were actually organizing a membership branch in Sonoma County when the fire started, and so we kind of accelerated our timetables so that we could help.
So in this year of crises, from the ongoing crisis of capitalism to the increasing eco-chaos of storms and earthquakes rocking the world, it's hard not to say we're f***ed.
Totally.
Can you talk about the fires in Northern California, give some context for droughts and floods in that state, and what Santa Rosa and Sonoma County have experienced this year?
Absolutely. I mean, I imagine most of your listeners will know that this is a result of climate change, and climate change is a result of industrial capitalism. But the nitty gritty in Northern California is that we had a 4-year drought, which just really decimated the state in a lot of ways. Dries out like the woods, it dries out the grasslands. Even during summer times in California, in how our environment is supposed to function, there is water in the environment, even when there's not rains. The water table gets replenished every winter, every rainy season, and that replenished water table really helps when wildfires start. And so the 4-year drought just decimated that sort of ingrained water supply. And then we got one rainy year, which was last year, finally, and it was this big relief. But the thing is that that's not an end to a drought. Like one drop in doesn't replace 4 drops taken out. 1 year of rain doesn't replace 4 years of drought. And so all that really did was like create short-term growth of plants like brush and so on and so forth, which then immediately dried out over summer. And this is an example of extreme climate. We're supposed to have a few months of rain, a few months of incredible heat, and in between every year. That's what California is supposed to be. But now we're having extreme droughts followed by extreme, very short rain periods, which create just huge amounts of basically fuel for the fire.
And how has the government response been to the fires? I know this is, for people who outside of California may not understand how big these counties are, but they're enormous in terms of the amount of space that they take up compared to states out east where I'm living currently. How have government responses been to this in terms of relief efforts and fighting back the fires? And what are reasonable reactions for these institutions? Have they followed through very well with that?
I mean, there's been massive state intervention, both from like the county authorities, the California state authorities, and the federal authorities. And just a little side note, the really effed up thing is they call that like unified intervention, they call it mutual aid, which is like perverse almost. Like that mutual aid being
it's like when police departments help each other, it's called mutual aid, right?
Yeah, and which is freaking ridiculous. That's mutual aid is about class and community solidarity, not about cops coming in from other counties. So that shit. Back to your question. Yeah, it's been a massive response. Of course, a massive police response using their quote mutual aid. So basically, to help police quote unquote the county, they've called in cops from all over the state of California. We've been seeing police cars from as far away as Santa Cruz and as far north as Eureka in the county. This is, of course, just to preserve like their opinion of law and order. The National Guard are doing that as well. There's been a huge scare of looters, which is their justification for bringing in a number of police and National Guard, neither of which are fire. That's an important piece. Neither of those groups are fighting the fire. Their explanation is that they're afraid of a wave of looters, basically sweeping through Sonoma County and taking everything. And really, there's only been a handful of reported cases of looters actually being, caught looting, not even getting into property rights and all that kind of stuff. I mean, just for pure law and order's sake, that's the number of people who are being arrested for looting is very much smaller than like the normal proportion of crime which occurs in the county. But they're still using those few cases to justify a massive police response, and it's kind of crazy. It really feels pretty crazy. There's of course a curfew in the areas of Santa Rosa, which is the major city of Sonoma County, which were damaged by the fire. And the extra police forces are being used to enforce that curfew. And this is debatable whether I consider this personally to be a part of the state response, but the Red Cross has been very big on the ground. I know they are considered a non-government organization or a charity, but they really function, in my opinion, as a sort of a humanitarian arm, you might say, of the state or federal government. And they have, they do good in some ways. I'm trying to walk a thin line here. But they also are all about centralizing the disaster response, right? Right away, right after the disaster occurred, there was a pretty large community response, both from like church groups and from community organizations, just trying to, help folks in the community, help your neighbor, that kind of thing. And a lot of shelters were established. The Red Cross has kind of systematically gone through and shut down what they call like smaller, just like superfluous shelters. And they've basically tried to centralize all of the disaster responses under their authority. And of course, they are tied very closely with the National Guard and with the local sheriff's department and the police response. So it's kind of like a hand in hand they're going.
I've been using my means to talk about the fires in Northern California and mostly focusing on Santa Rosa as a large city in that area, but also because this is where I'm from.
Totally.
This is where I have a lot of friends and people that I care about. Also, there's been a number of fires around Anaheim and in Southern California, but one of the astounding things about the fires in Northern California is not just how it developed into literally a perfect storm of high winds, lots of fuel, maybe PG&E down to power lines, sparking fires in rural areas, and the high death toll, but also the amount of damage done very quickly to high concentrations of human populations.
Yes.
That being Santa Rosa being the biggest city, to see the fire actually like cross the 6 lanes of Highway 101 on that Sunday night and into a highly populated area, and like with a lot of poor people, a lot of people living in trailer parks, a lot of renters, whatever. Can you talk about, to your understanding, what the scale of the damage is to people's personal living situations in Santa Rosa? And is the fire contained at this point or being held back?
So just the fire update currently, there were 4 major fires in Sonoma County with a lot of smaller fires. Those 4 major fires used to be several smaller fires that sort of unified into big, just blocks of burnt area. The damage in Santa Rosa is the most striking. Like you were saying, it's an urbanized environment, and so the fire getting into it is kind of unprecedented, really. I mean, wildfires happen all of the time, even not in drought years, but getting into in a big way into an urban area is just unprecedented. We're looking at around 6,700 structures destroyed. That's the best estimate that we can get currently. That doesn't necessarily mean just houses. That includes businesses, but that's a lot of houses because we Coffee Lane and Fountain Grove were 2 neighborhoods in northern Santa Rosa, which are basically totally destroyed, as well as of course the trailer parks you were mentioning. So the damage is extensive. Estimates are that between 20 and 25,000 people were displaced by the fire. Many of those people will, of course, be able to return to to their homes because the evacuation area was in Santa Rosa at least double the size of the area that was actually destroyed, but many will not.
And you say the fires at this point are contained. They're not going to be doing any further damage, or?
Oh, of course. It looks like as of this morning, around 3 of the major fires were out, but 1 was still going with some strength. According to CAL FIRE, though, every time they kind of put out, they can then channel all of their remaining firefighting resources onto the remaining fires. So there's a lot of confidence when you listen to the press conferences from the state that the fires are going to be contained, but we're still looking at only 60% containment on the remaining fire. And there are still fires outside the county, in Lake County, and like we were saying, other fires have already started to burn in Central and Southern California.
You mentioned the evacuation zone. Do you have any anecdotal information about how the situation for the recently houseless or refugee folks, how their situation is or what their needs are at the moment?
So that information is sort of a focus for the IWW right now because we don't have a solid answer to that, primarily because the evacuation areas have only just started to be repopulated. So what that means is the sheriff, the cops were not allowing people back into their neighborhoods until basically yesterday. So we'll be getting more information about what the needs are for folks whose fire affected their neighborhood but maybe didn't get their house. There's a lot of information that needs to be gathered, basically. For the people whose houses were destroyed, we don't really know. They're either in shelters or with friends or family, but we don't even have a solid number of how many people are now houseless as a direct result of the fire. Like I said, one of the fires is still going, so it's still, in a lot of ways, the response right now on the ground is still very reactionary. We're trying to keep an eye for the future because once the fires are out, that's the beginning of the struggles that are going to be happening in Sonoma County. There are many issues which are already being raised, such as renting crises and what's going to happen. Is there going to be a mass exodus from Sonoma County because of this destruction? There's a lot of questions, and we don't yet have a lot of answers, but we're working on it.
Yeah, just a little more context in terms of renting crisis. Sonoma County, because of its proximity to the Bay Area, has been, since the 80s, increasingly a more and more expensive place to live. And there was, I guess it was last year, right? The city was attempting to impose a rent cap, which was awesome as an idea, but it would have meant a lot of houses that were maybe under a certain level of quality of upkeep would be evicted to be able to make the changes to make them accessible,
right,
make them city sanctioned, I guess. Right.
Totally.
So it's a battle for affordable housing, and with people being pushed further and further out of the Bay proper, especially working populations of color, they're getting pushed into the suburbs. The jobs aren't as much there. It seems like just kind of a rough situation for people that don't own their own houses.
It's a shit show. It's a shit show.
So for listeners who don't know, can you explain what the IWW is, where it came from, and what y'all are trying to do while getting this chapter up and official in Sonoma County?
Totally. I mean, big picture, the IWW is an industrial labor union, founded way back in 1905. It was sort of historically the sort of the black sheep of the union movement in the United States because the IWW was non-hierarchical, meaning we don't have union presidents. We still don't have union presidents. We're very much membership run, direct democracy both in the union. And of course, the aim is to basically see the abolition of the wage system and create workplace democracy everywhere people work. The IWW way back in history was 1905, so on and so forth, was at the forefront of a lot of the really great labor struggles, like the 8-hour workday, even fighting for a 4-hour workday, ending child labor. The IWW was really a spearhead for the rights that many workers now have. The IWW, though, was crushed in a lot of ways by the federal government during the first Red Scare. There was a lot of fear that these unionists were, going to undermine the American government, I guess. And so the IWW was pretty thoroughly smashed as a labor organization way back then. But it survived in many different ways all the way up to the president. From a very small membership of, I believe in 2000, only around 300 people, but has sort of seen a resurrection in the last decade, trying to expand the definition of who is a worker, who does labor, trying to like build upon that labor history. And a lot of the newer directions of the IWW have been, for instance, trying to organize inside prisons. That's been one of the bigger projects recently. The IWOC, or Incarcerated Workers Organizing Committee, has been a big piece of the IWW recently, which I also think I don't think there's ever been an attempt by a union to organize prison laborers, which is pretty exciting. And also just trying to expand what the definition of what organized labor can do, what that actually means, and also sort of attack some of the current standards of what unions do, like basically just funnel money to the Democratic Party. I'm a supporter of many of the bigger unions like the Teamsters and such, but they often they have union bosses that are, in bed with the Democratic Party or Hillary Clinton or sometimes even the Republicans, and they really crush the voices of their own workers.
Another element, too, that's come up over the last few years is the organizing of general defense committees as like popular working class tools for mutual defense, I guess. And
absolutely,
that's one thing. We have a chapter of the GDC here in our town, which I'm not involved with, but they're good folks. Can you talk about in Sonoma County specifically what sort of focus outside of this immediate disaster relief that the burgeoning chapter has been engaged with or trying to focus on?
Totally. I mean, we were going through like an organizing period where we were basically just trying to organize ourselves before announcing our creation. We didn't have any active campaigns. We were just trying to sort of collect kind of dedicated organizers and members slowly and sort of not underground, but below the radar. We didn't have a Facebook page. We didn't make any public announcements. We weren't necessarily even looking for campaigns yet. We just wanted to sort of build infrastructure for an organization that could, serve Sonoma County and serve the workers of Sonoma County, more importantly, in the long run. But then the fire happened. So really all of the and so when the fire occurred, we just accelerated our timetable and sort of just, announced ourselves and started working. So really, the projects that we've been working on have been solely dedicated to fire relief and to planning for what the future of our county looks like. Because like it or not, the working people who are affected by this fire, we basically are predicting that this fire will influence how the IWW will organize and how most community organizations or like anti-state or leftist organizations will organize in Sonoma County for many years, because there's going to be mass displacement. There's going to be wage fights because of the change of, the economic population. There's going to be like I said, a shitstorm in Sonoma County as a result of this firestorm. That's the direction that we're moving. That's the direction that fate put us on.
So what sort of relief efforts have y'all been involved with as these fires are ongoing and working towards that aftermath, besides trying to take a survey of what the landscape might look like post-fire?
So currently what we've been doing is we've been trying to find folks who have been sort of let down or have fallen through the cracks of the broader state response, like the Red Cross specifically. So basically, folks who were houseless previously before the fire and undocumented communities have been the main groups that we've outreached to, and we've basically tried to just get them support through the crisis period. It's been a week. Actually, I think, it's been basically a week since the fire started, and so we're just at hopefully the end of the immediate need to respond crisis period. So over the last week, we've been trying to feed folks who are usually going to, like a Catholic charity, for instance. The Catholic charity basically shut its doors to houseless folks who were houseless before the fire to open its doors to houseless folks because of the fire. We've heard and seen many cases of shelters run by the Red Cross actually turning away folks that, quote, looked homeless. So our response has mainly been around trying to find and help and give support in any way we can to these communities. And that includes finding donations taking in donations before they get pulled into the Red Cross system, finding communities where they're at, where are the encampments that were burned out moving to, Where are folks going who, cannot necessarily trust the police or the National Guard or ICE, and making contact and trying to, just fulfill the needs they have in this short-term period.
So, Emilio, can you tell a little bit more about the shelter situation? You talked about previously houseless folks being turned away from some of the Catholic charities, and about some of the shortcomings of the Red Cross in terms of reacting to an unprecedented disaster in Sonoma County with the fires. Do you have any more you can share about that?
Totally. We actually got a report from Guerneville, which is a town out west of Santa Rosa, and in Guerneville, there was a shelter that was established. It was run by the Red Cross, and there was a conflict in should they take previously houseless folks, who they of course referred to as homeless people. Should they take in these sort of folks? Their identification of previously houseless folks was of course by their view of their aesthetics, right? Did they look clean or not? And this became a debate in this shelter of whether they should take in previously houseless folks or not. And the debate got so heated that eventually their response and their conclusion, their solution to that was to shut the shelter down. So rather than actually try to engage with this issue, which really shouldn't be an issue at all, they decided to close the shelter down, aid from going out to anyone.
So because they didn't have the ability to service parts of the population that may have fallen through cracks or sought services in other ways, maybe have like long-term issues around neurodivergence or around chronic houselessness or issues of chemical dependencies, I guess they're prioritizing people who had just recently lost houses. It sounds like a really cynical way to deal with human need.
It absolutely is, and they have the resources. The crazy thing about it is the resources right now in Sonoma County exist to where everyone can be fed, everyone can find shelter, everyone can get clothing, batteries, chargers, even cell. All the resources exist because resources have poured into the county, but it's not being distributed by the Red Cross to the community at large, because they just don't want to interface with the issues. They don't want to have a real discussion about the problems of capitalism. They don't want to engage with it. So they would rather not give aid to anyone than to actually discuss these issues. It's a prioritization of property over human life. The people who are being welcomed into Red Cross shelters lost property, lost their house, and that is viewed as the gateway into the Red Cross support, into community support, while people who didn't necessarily lose property, even though they may have been traumatized, even though they are suffering at the same level, if not more, than the people who previously had homes, are refused, because that would just be helping people, and that's not relevant.
So in that organizing effort, what sorts of help do you need now? What can people send your way if they're in the listening audience and maybe not in the area? Or if they are listening, for instance, on KWTF out of Bodega Bay, or listening to a podcast in the area, and they want to help support autonomous non-state efforts at relief, where's some good ways to plug in?
Well, in the just the purely money realm, and I know that a lot of folks can't give money, and like respect, I'm one of y'all. We have like a long-term sort of like sustaining fund going to try to build infrastructure around the communities who have been affected. You can find that like donation place on our Facebook page, which is just facebook.com SoCo, or Sonoma County, just SOCOIWW. And that's posted on our Facebook page. Money helps. It's unfortunate that we live in capitalism and we need it for supplies. But, if you live in Sonoma County and have the capacity to organize with us, you should join us. Message our Facebook page. And we'll get in contact with you. It would be great. We always need more people to help us out, to build our membership branch. Donations of actual supplies are not necessarily being requested right now, just because we've gotten a lot of really great supplies. Money is a lot easier to use, because as needs come up, we can then address those needs directly with the cash. And if you're a listening person who is not in Sonoma County and can't give cash, which I totally understand, you should think about joining the IWW. This is a unified organization that's stretches across multiple countries, and every local adds to its strength. Every IWOC committee, every General Defense Committee, together we're stronger. As a class united, we are stronger.
So one thing, and maybe this is not the case, just and correct me if I'm wrong, but one thing I'd heard about what was needed in Sonoma County was, or in the fire-affected areas, to be fair to the larger region of Northern California and the North Bay, that was needed is respirators or breathing apparatuses, because the fires have been so intense, and that maybe the local supply chains have been overloaded and they're not available in stores anymore, especially to the people that might need it most. Is that the kind of thing that would be useful to send, or really just money?
Well, yeah, respirators would actually be pretty nice. A lot of us are using the N95 respirators, which if you go and you're looking to buy the masks, is a number that is a kind of a rating which will be prominently displayed on boxes and the like. And N95 is like the baseline, like very limited sort of mask that you can buy, and they keep out particulates. A lot of the ash that's in the air, and there's a lot of ash in the air. It looks like fog sometimes at night over Santa Rosa is toxic. A lot of the houses that were burned had carcinogenic things that burned up and are now potentially poisoning the air. And N95 masks keep out a lot of that, and they're the cheapest option. So yeah, getting those is a priority, and distributing those is a priority. We are looking to try to get better masks, because these masks, though they work, are pretty cheap and need to be replaced after a few days. And they also don't do well against oils that were burned, such as tires that burned up and that petrochemical got into the air. And so we need P95 rated masks, and they are basically nowhere to be found in Sonoma County. So yes, that could be a huge assistance.
I don't know if maybe if somebody wanted to collect some of those or send them. I don't know if the Peace and Justice Center is still a thing, but they're a physical address. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Next to Juilliard Park.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Maybe they would be able to.
Yeah, Peace and Justice Center is a good place to send physical things. Just make sure that you write that marked for the IWW, so it doesn't get lost in their storage of things coming in. Peace and Justice Center is a great option. We also have physical locations. We're not gonna give those out in public things like this, just because there are members' houses. But if you message our Facebook page, we can get in contact with you and vet you, and then we can that'll help. But the Peace and Justice Center is a great option.
Yeah. So anyone who does want to send it to the IWW care of the Peace and Justice Center of Sonoma County, the address there is 467 Sebastopol Avenue, Santa Rosa, California 95401. But otherwise, as suggested by Emilio, go ahead and contact them over the Facebook if you have that, and they can give you some places to send materials. Besides the Facebook page that you'd mentioned as a contact for y'all, there has been running a page for fundraising. I wonder if you wouldn't share that with the listeners, and also the hotline that y'all have set up.
Absolutely. So we have a fundraiser on generosity.com. It's just under SoCo IWW Long-Term Community Support Fund. SoCo IWW Long-Term Community Support Fund. We're taking donations there. We're hoping to eventually get a better system of getting donations, but for the time being, the Generosity website is our go-to site. And we have a hotline that we established because a lot of folks in the county don't have internet access or Facebook, and that number, which is our rapid response and information hotline, is 707-800-9478. 707-800-9478.
So you mentioned the ashes at night being sort of like a fog hanging over Santa Rosa. Can you talk about what the city is like right now? Like, it's not just the normal functioning day to day for everyone, but I would imagine there are parts of the city, I don't know, like parts of like South Dutton Road or parts of Santa Rosa Avenue, like south of Bennett Valley or like Highway 12, where it's far enough away from the immediate danger of fire, like buttressed by downtown, that things kind of seem like they're kind of functioning as normal. And I wonder what the liminal zone between holy shit, this neighborhood's gone.
Right.
I'm houseless, and whatever local breakfast place is running and operating on a day to day are like. What's that like, holding that or seeing that tension there?
It's it's honestly confusing, and you feel it in the interactions with people in the city. Like when the wind is such an important thing in this entire situation. Like especially during the last week, where if the wind blew one direction, more neighborhoods would be lost, basically, and it didn't. So when the wind is in the right direction, you can actually see the plumes of smoke rising in the distance in the hills, and it looks like my mother actually described it as looking like a mushroom cloud going off. And so, there'll be days where you're walking around the city and you're basically living under this. It looks like a mushroom. It looks like a nuclear bomb going off over the hill, and then the wind will change again, and the ash will start coming down again over the city, and everyone has to go back inside or wear masks. A lot of people don't, which is really upsetting and concerning. And then you lose sight of the hills, and it looks like it's evening time. For 2 or 3 days, the county was existing in this state of perpetual sunset because the sun was being turned red by the smoke and ash in the air. And so people are trying to go about the day-to-day lives, and I see it. I see it in Petaluma. I see it sometimes in Santa Rosa, but there's really no way to fully ignore it, and you see it in the expressions on people's faces. And then of course you'll see a line of Humvees going down the road, and you get even if you were just in a nice little breakfast place as you mentioned, you suddenly kind of get snapped back to reality that oh shit, it's going down.
So one of the things that has come to light, not just in this fire but in past fires in California, which is a huge state. It covers a lot of territory. It's got large populations. It's also got huge prison populations and jail populations and people in various states of incarceration. Hey, it's the United States. This is what we do, apparently. There's also been over 1,000, at least that's what I heard a few days ago, prisoners that are engaged in doing fire relief,
Right.
firefighting.
Right.
I saw one meme that came and mentioned that around the Los Angeles area fires near Anaheim, stating that the LA Fire Department isn't going to hire any of these people who are being trained and putting themselves out there for between $1 and $2.50 or so. These very, very, very low, even lower than server wages, putting their lives on the line, aren't going to be hireable by the fire departments after the fact, once they're released and once they've done this amazing, heroic, and dangerous job.
Absolutely.
Because they've got felonies on their record. Can you talk a little bit about this? Like, since we've talked about IWOC and organizing prisoners, and this week has actually shown a number of prison uprisings around the country.
Oh wow!
Like in South Carolina in particular, but the sort of conflict in capitalism between the state's need for free or cheap labor, people's need to want to feel like they're helping, and also to get out of the doldrum and dangerous situation of being on the inside, and what this sort of like shows us for the future of capitalism.
I mean, totally. I can speak to it more broadly. I don't think it's a crisis or a problem in capitalism. I think that is capitalism functioning, a-okay. It's not something that you hear a lot about. I on my face I see a lot of my upper middle class, primarily white associates talking about, I love the firefighters so much. I love all the things they're doing. Thank you so much. Sonoma County strong, all that kind of stuff. And there's never a mention of incarcerated folks who are fighting fires for poverty wages, and that's just not in the mindset of a lot of people. And I think that's that's the goal. That's the goal. Every firefighter you see downtown, because you have to understand, for folks who don't know Sonoma County, it's valleys with high population density in the valleys, and then kind of rolling hills, small mountains. So most of the fires are of course occurring in the hills and mountains, just out in between the populated valleys. And most of the incarcerated workers who are fighting the fires, and we know they're there. We know they're there. They're out in those hills, right? They're basically kept separate from the
population. So there's no way to engage with it. You don't even see it. Every firefighter you see in downtown Santa Rosa is one of the firefighting professionals that makes about $50,000 a year, Santa Rosa average. They're well paid, they're well trained, and they're heroes, and so on and so forth. And then great, I'm really happy that these folks are doing a great job. But the fact that the very dangerous brush fire pieces have huge prison populations, that's where the prisoners are being sent to do the work. It really just seems insidious to me, and it seems intentional. Folks don't want people to be discussing this, because in the future, and there will be more fires in California. Already there are this year, but next year and the year after that and the year after that and the year after that and the year after that, over the decades, because of climate change, these fires are going to be a thing, just that are going to happen. So I think it's 30% of firefighters in California for CAL FIRE are incarcerated workers.
Whoa.
It's going to go up. That number is going to become 50% in the next 5 years. I'm willing to bet money on it.
Thank you so much, Emilio, for taking the time to have this conversation. I wish you the best of luck. I hope your family and loved ones are safe. Let's take down capitalism.
Thank you so much, Bert. Solidarity forever.
Solidarity. We hope you enjoyed this mini episode of The Final Straw Radio. More of our audio can be found at thefinalstrawradio.noblogs.org, including our weekly radio show. Keep an eye out at the end of the month for Sub.media's 7th installment of their mini documentary series, Trouble, which this month will focus on disaster relief by anarchists and autonomous networks. Take care of each other.